A lot of people think, oh, computer animation, everyone's doing it, and the whole movie is done that way. Almost everything we do is still drawn by hand and still painted by hand. But occasionally there's an effect or something that the directors want in the film that would be virtually impossible to do with traditional animation techniques. Here we've got a hand-drawn model sheet. It's drawn by one of the character designers, and it's basically a model for what our wildebeest should look like. And from this hand-drawn model, we evolved a computer-generated model. This model is a three-dimensional representation of the beast that matches the look of the first model. One of our hand animators, Ruben Aquino, gave us some reference artwork of a hand-drawn wildebeest galloping. And from that, Linda Bell created the three-dimensional motion that you see. It comes close to matching Ruben's animation, except that Linda had to extrapolate and make the motion work in 3 dimensions. Here we get the sense of that motion rotating in 3 dimensions. We can place our camera anywhere. So it's up to our 3D animators to translate that idea in 2 dimensions into something in 3 dimensions, to make it so that that motion or that behavior works from all of the different angles, because we're going to need to look at this thing from all different angles during the course of the scene. This shows us our computer model looking more like traditional animation. We've put inking lines on it. We've got FX-drawn hair and a tail that looks like more traditional animation. The painting is very simple. It's a solid color with a tone underneath like the other characters in the film. Here's one wildebeest just running in an environment. The background here was painted by hand, and our animator drew a line indicating where he wanted the wildebeest to run. And now we've got the wildebeest running along that path, and we've also added some character to it. It leans into his curves. Another thing that we've been able to create is the shadow effect underneath the wildebeest. It would have been also very difficult to create 700 shadows underneath 700 independent beasts. To create the effect of the wildebeests avoiding one another, we had to write special programs for that. The computer has no trouble at all letting wildebeests run through one another. So we thought of each wildebeest as a little magnet, and the magnets sort of push away from one another. But one wildebeest wasn't enough. We needed hundreds of wildebeest. So we had to come up with a way that our animators could control the behavior of hundreds of beasts. So we came up with this idea of a simulation, sort of playing follow the leader. These bugs sort of show us what the simulation is. We've got leaders and followers. And the followers have to follow their leader, but avoid one another, because we don't want the wildebeest to bump into each other. So here we're showing some of the different examples of what we can get when we take wildebeest, run them along, from the top perspective. Then the next step is to match it to the background. We've built a 3-dimensional grid that matches the perspective and the look of a background that's going to be in the scene. On that grid, we place one of these simulations where each of those bugs now gets replaced with a full running, galloping, hopping wildebeest. And here are some rough scenes showing footage from the film using this technique. Another thing that we did was, for final color, we wanted to give each wildebeest slightly different colors, and we can show that here. You can see for tests, we gave them really random, wild colors. We called them our Peter Max beasts. Here we've got the coloration of each beast being slightly different and random. We did this during the rough phase, so that the directors could say, well, I like the scene, but we need to take the pink guy with the yellow face and move him down slightly, or can we make this guy run a little bit faster, or maybe we should add another beast behind the lavender guy. So by giving each beast a different color, it allowed us to talk about the beasts in the scene. Of course, when we put this to film, in the rough phase, we're putting it to black and white film, so those all just become shades of gray. And then in final color, we do give them each different colorings, but it's within a very limited range of what we want to design the wildebeest to look like. Some of them are slightly darker gray, some of them are slightly lighter gray.